Hello YouTube, I'm Tallman Brad, and today we're going to have a look at building a vanilla 3D printer. You will no doubt have seen the video on the background that rolls behind the menu in the game, with pistons zigging in and out and a ship rotating, and it looks very impressive and very complicated. Well, this printer won't look quite like that. I'm not going to show you the ultimate 3D printer, but an efficient, simple and fun little system to print small grid rovers, miners and fighters from your blueprints. In this video we'll use a projector, pistons, hinges, welders, and we'll be setting up button panels so we can trigger actions. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy it or find it useful, and subscribe to easily find more of these tutorials. Subscribers are very welcome to request tutorials they'd like to see me do. Just get into the comment section and ask away. Well, I'm sure you're all aware of real-life 3D printers. Well, a Space Engineer's version is pretty much just that. You have a control system of some sort that stores an image of what you're wanting to print. Then there is a mechanism that automatically creates the object for you without you having to use any manual tools. Now, I've already shown you the easiest way to build a 3D printer in the projectors video, which you can see here. The ideal 3D printer for me is simply a combination of a projector and the nanobot mod. You could place the nanobot build and repair system next to the projector, and if you wanted to limit its working area to the space in front of the projector, this would also help cover blueprints of various sizes and complicated shapes. But there are many among us that would prefer not to use mods, and that's fine too, so we'll stay vanilla for this one. Also, for a change, I want to do this more as a demo than a tutorial, as I don't think there's a right or wrong way. There are many different ways, and this is just one of them. I'm going to start with a cargo container which is going to store all of the components because I'm not attached to the base. Now, I've done that just so that when I go into the command menu, the control menu, it doesn't show all of the items that are on the base. So this is just to keep things a little bit clearer for you to see. So I'm going to place a cargo container. Instead of using conveyor tubes, I'm just using the conveyor junctions for ease, because it means that I can snap on components all the way around and I can reroute components in whichever direction I fancy. So it's a simple system. I'm going to start off with the height that I want the projection to be. I'm going to go one higher than that. So the actual projection is going to come out this way on. So let's give us some room to work. And then we'll start with the rotor, because I'm going to use a small grid projector. We'll flip the rotor around the right way. And if you've seen any of the other videos, you'll know this is how you convert from large grid to small grid. You use a rotor. And I'm also going to detach that head and replace it with a small head so I can get the small grid blocks attached to it. Now, obviously, you can just go into your menu here if you don't have any mods installed, but I do have installed the Build Vision mod because it's extremely useful. So don't worry if you don't have it. You can do all of the same things by just accessing the control panel. So I'm holding down Control to bring up Build Vision. I'm going to tap my middle mouse wheel to open it fully, and then I'm going to find the option to detach the head, and off it goes, and it despawned for some reason. Not to worry. And then I'm also now going to add a small head. Just click on that, and it's there. And incidentally, to get rid of this, you can just look away, but you can also hold down Shift and just tap the mouse wheel again, and that gets rid of it. Now we need to weld that up, because when it brings one in, it doesn't bring it in fully made. And for some reason, these are tricky to catch. There, I've just got it there. Now the next thing I want to do is, because I don't want this to turn when I start putting things onto it, I'm just going to quickly lock that. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold down Control, tap the mouse wheel to open this up, and then rotor lock. I'm going to turn to on so that won't accidentally turn. And on there, I'm going to place the projector. So if you haven't watched the projectors video that I did, I'll put a link at the top right hand side of the screen here, and I go through quite a bit of detail on it, and it might be handy for you to watch, but I'm just going to assume that you haven't seen it perhaps, and I'll just very quickly explain what's going on with this projector here. Yeah, you can see the cross there. That indicates the top of the projector, and this is useful to know because you need to be able to know which way it's going to project your image without having to try and fix it later. And the front of the projector is this line. Now, I think for ease, if it just even didn't have these dots all the way around the sides, that would be a good start. It could even say top on the top of there, or up or something. But no, they've made it probably as complicated as it can be, because it's actually really hard to distinguish the difference between the sides. So anyway, that way there is projecting that way. So the cross is on the top, and the line is on the front, so that's effectively the lens of a traditional projector. You can see there that that's placed, that would place the wrong way, so that would be placing so the projection went straight up over. So I'm going to rotate it that way and then swing it around. Now that should project out towards me, just like that. And that's a reasonable height, so our image that we're going to be working on with the printer is going to be hanging in this space with plenty of room around it for us to move. So the next thing I'm going to do is place down some conveyor junctions. And again, you could be using just normal conveyor tubes for this. I think I'm going to go one higher for this. There we go. And from that, I'm going to bring out a piston. Now, as I said, this isn't the ultimate system. It's just a fun way of doing it that you might enjoy, and it's very practical. It actually works very well. So I've put two pistons end to end there, and because they're going through a conveyor junction, they will be able to access and pass through the components from this storage container down here. Now on the end of this, I want to use hinges, a hinge, and while we're here, let's also get the welder. There we go. So let's start with the hinge, number 8. I'm going to rotate it around. And again, here's another one which unfortunately isn't the best design. Now, that's the way I like to work. I like to have the notch, and I'll place it so you can see what I'm talking about. I like to have the notch pointing down over, because to me that indicates negative. Critical. So in that direction, it's a negative value. So around there will be minus so-and-so degrees, and up from there will be plus so-and-so degrees, whatever it may be. So that's just a handy way of knowing which, it's not that handy, but that's just a way of knowing which way around it is. And I'm going to put 2 of these on here, and you'll see why very shortly. Let's flip that around the same. So that's also got the negative marker going that way. And then on the end of this, very simply, I'm going to place the welder, and I'm going to put it this way so the door is coming out the sides and not out the top and bottom, and there's a reason for that, and I'll come to that when I come to it. Alright, the next thing we need to do is to group these things together and get some sort of control system in place. So we're going to need a control seat. Pick an easy one to see over. That one looks good. Pop that on there. We use the control seat instead of the build vision to set this up, just so it's good for everybody. And then if I hit K, I can go into the menu that I want. So the hinges, let's group the hinges. So click on the first one, shift, click on the second one, and I'm just going to call them hinges. Obviously, if this was connected to your base, you might want to call them printer hinges or something. And then they do the same with the pistons, shift, and they're just pistons. Now with these hinges, there's a range of motion that I want them to go through. Where they're sat at the minute, where they're just pointing straight out, should be 0 degrees. There we go, it tells you there, 0 degrees. So that's as high as I want them to go, so the upper limit is going to be 0. But I want the lower limit to be down below that so I can angle them down over. So the first hinge there, I want the lower limit. Let's see, where the upper limit's on 90. I'm going to control and click on that so I can just type in 0 instead of fanning on with the slider. The lower limit, I'm happy for that to be 90. Then we'll do the same thing with the second hinge. If I click on that one, I'm going to change the limits on that one. So the upper limit is set to 0, but the lower limit minus 45. And you'll see why in just a second. So now both the hinges have their limits set. It hasn't got a velocity at the minute, so I'm going to set those both by holding control and clicking on the slider, and I'm going to see the velocity is -1. So that should make both of those hinges curl around. Let's have a look. Yeah, we can see there. They're both turning, and you'll just see. I'm going to go and get some hydrogen in a second. So you can see that top one is going to the full 90 degrees. This bottom one's already stopped at 45. And if you have a glance here, you can see how I came up with those numbers. And see how close things are there. So you can probably already see exactly how this is going to work. So let's get the controls set up. I'm interested in the button panel across the bottom of the screen on my HUD. And I'm going to go into G. And I'm going to use these groups to set up controls here. Now the first thing I'm going to want to do is to mess about with the projected image to get it in the right place. So let's start with that. We'll start with the projector, and again, if you've seen that projector video, this will all make sense, but if you haven't, I'm going through it here, but I'll not spend too long on it. I'm just going to drag the projector down into one. It'll ask what I want to do with it. I'm going to use these offsets, so I'm basically going to use all 6 of these offsets to fill the first 6 slots. So the first one's increase horizontal, second decrease horizontal, and so on until I've done all 6. So once we have a projected image loaded up, we can just use the keyboard buttons 1 to 6 to move it around to get it into the position we want. The next thing we're going to want to do is to be able to move the piston in and out. So the groups, first of all, let's go for pistons. It's asking what I want to do. Well, I just want to reverse the pistons. The next thing I want to do is the hinges. Again, what do I want to do with those? I just want to reverse them. And then lastly, if we go back into all blocks, is the welder. And obviously, we just want to toggle that on and off. So if I hit number 7, there we go, and I'll jump out and we'll have a look. The pistons are extending. And the speed's not too bad. I might slow that down a little bit. I want to make sure the welder's got time to do all of the work, so I'll hit 7 to bring it back in. In the meantime, I'm just going to hit K to go in here. We'll go to the pistons and have a look at the speed they are at the minute. The velocity is minus 0.5. Well, let's click on that and say minus 0.3. I'm going to try. So that's changing the speed of both pistons. So the total speed is going to be 0.6. That's not looking too bad there at the moment height-wise. But I think the best thing we can do is to pull up a projection and get it into position and just see how close the welder is to doing its job properly. So let's do that now. Jump in the seat, go into K, hit P, there's the projector, go down to blueprints, and from here I'm just going to find, we'll do the scrap hatchback, copy to the clipboard. So still in the projector there's some settings that I want to make sure I've got switched on here. I want to keep the projection. I don't want it to disappear when it's finished building. So I'm just going to put a tick in there. I'm not going to do show only buildable. I want to be able to see the whole thing to set this up properly, so that's fine. The rest of it I'm going to leave. I'm not going to do any of these here. We're going to use the hotbar for that. So let's come out of that, and you can just see poking over the top there, there's part of the blueprint. So this is where the hotbar tools come in. Let's start with 1 and 2. We'll hit 1 and see where it goes. I can see it's moving left and right. You can just see it poking out there. That looks like it could be in the middle to me. Now I'm going to go for 3 and 4. Just hit 3. It's disappeared, so that's no good. Let's do 4. There we go. It's coming up towards me so I can see it better. And then 5 or 6 is the distance away from the projector. So I'll get that roughly where I think it should be. Probably further out. And then I'm going to jump out and have a look and see what it looks like from the side. Yeah, so that's nowhere near, but that's okay. So there's the projector there. So I need this whole image in front of that. So it's got to come out a bit more and down a bit more. Now, if you're doing this remotely, it would be a lot easier. And I would highly recommend watching the remote access video because it's extremely useful. Let's have another look. Yeah, so if you were doing this remotely, or if you had your control seat, I mean, there would be no reason why you couldn't just have a control seat here so you can see exactly where it is while you're doing it. That doesn't look too bad there. See, the projector's right in the middle of the first block that needs to be welded. So that's okay. Now, again, if you've seen that projection video, you'll know, or if you've used projectors before, you'll know that images from a projector can only be welded if there is something that's solid or exists in the world touching part of the actual blueprint. So you'll see what I mean here. I'm just going to put a block on top of there and another one. Then I'm going to extend it back and keep an eye on the connector at the back here. You can see it's a ghost image at the minute, but it'll go to a slightly thicker ghost image when I place this block here. There you go. It's a little bit more visible. So that's telling me that that can be welded. So if I turned on the welder now, and it had the materials, it would start welding that component. So that to me looks like the placement is pretty good. Obviously, if this is all connected to your base through conveyors and you have all the materials, then you're good to go. You can just get started. But because I've built this as a separate system, I'm going to show you some admin tools to give me the resources to get the components to build this. What I will do for ease is just spawn a selection of all of the common components into here, and this could be an opportunity for you to see how to do this. I'm making sure I'm looking at the cargo container, and then I'm going to do Shift and 10. Now this is assuming that you have administrator's privileges, and you can check that if you hit Alt and F10, you can bring up the admin screen, and then here we have creative mode tools switched on, which is what I use for all of the tutorials. So because I have that switched on, then it means that I can look at the cargo container, hold down Shift and hit F10, and that brings up the spawn menu, but it's not the spawning blueprints menu, that's a different one, that's just F10 by itself. This one is for the actual components, and if I go through the list, we can very quickly, I'm just going to make sure I've got 1,000 typed in there, and I'm going to put, spawn into the target container 1,000 of all of the common components that are used in building. We'll start with the bulletproof glass, and we'll have 1,000 of those. Then we'll go down to computers, 1,000 construction components, and so on. And just escape out of that, and then if I have a look in here, we can see what we ended up with in the end. So this is all of the common components that are used to build pretty much everything in Space Engineers. So let's test it out. First thing I'll do is hit 9 to turn on the welder, and it should, hopefully, fingers crossed, start welding up the ship. And then I'm going to extend the piston arms so that it passes through the rest of the blueprint, and hopefully it'll weld everything up for us. Let's try it out. So number 9 first. There's the welder on. It's welding away. It's actually done quite a lot without even moving. So now let's extend the pistons. Number 7. And I'll jump out again and we'll have a look. And there we go. And let's just have a check to see if it's missed anything. Before we do that, let's just turn off the welder. So that's number 9. We'll have a look at the front. The lights are there. The grill's there. Those lights are. The wheels are all on underneath. Yep, everything's... Can't see any ghost images where it hasn't been welded. So there's a visual check, but obviously what we can do for printers... I might not have mentioned this in the last video, I'm not sure if it did, but anyway, if we go to K, in the search, look at stutter, and go to projector, we can have a look and see down here, build process 266 of 260. It's complete, basically. It hasn't missed anything. If it had, it would say 265 and missing the headlight or whatever it may be. Okay, now that's done. We need to release this. There we go. We'll jump in and have a little test drive. Great, that's all working. So that worked well, and because I left the setting on for it to keep the projection after it's finished welding it, the image is there ready for it to start welding again. But remember that because I've had to grind that off to get it to drop the car down, to drop the rover down, we'll need to put another block back on there to get that to be able to be welded again. For a bit of fun, if you wanted to challenge yourself, you could place a small grid projector on here and have an image of a block projected there, so that when you retract your arm, it could weld that block up in order for it to be able to weld this up. How about that? So you've seen that this system can build a simple small grid rover like this. I've also tried it with my miner, the larger one, and it builds this no problem. So that sort of size it's very comfortable with. If you're going for something that's a little bit wider, then all you would need to do really is to add some more welders to the side of this, and I'll show you exactly the sort of configuration I'm thinking of. If I just put another conveyor junction on there, and there, and place those on there, what will happen with this system is we're still starting with this front welder here, so that's welding the start of the blueprint, this part here, and then those other heads would be further back over here. So if you have a blueprint that is shaped where it might curve round past this point of connection here, this sort of system would help catch those parts that were forwards of the first thing that's being welded. And of course, it would then cover things that are wider. If you like the fanciness of the rotating thing, we're attached to a rotor. So you could very easily just set this to rotate and you'll have that fancy rotating effect as it's welding, if that's what you're into. While I was working on this project off camera to test it out, I invited one of my patrons into this world, and we had a bit of an experiment with a few different additional options. And one of the things was that we placed a grinding pit at the bottom, so if we were unhappy with the fabrication, we could just cut it loose into the grinding pit and it would recycle all of the components, and that was quite useful. Then the next thing that we looked at was adding a piston across here with some blast door blocks running the length of here, and then you would retract the piston and it would push your build to the side when it was completed and retract again, ready for the next one to be welded and dropped down like a production line. And that was good fun. The wonderful world of space engineers. Well, if you've enjoyed this video and you found it useful, then please leave a like. If you have any suggestions for tutorials that you would like to see, then just ask in the comments. And if you'd like to talk a little bit further about space engineers, I have a section on my Discord page dedicated just to this game, which you're more than welcome to join and get involved in some conversations on. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.